Hello, once again, this is J. Matt Wigan with Reviews from Purgatory. This time around, I am reviewing Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. It's really a strange sequel to talk about because, you know, it's probably the most reviled sequel ever made. I mean, there's a couple others in the running, but certainly everyone always complains about this one. Usually just because of Michael Myers not being in it. They didn't get what the movie was going for. If we were to go to imdb, we would find review after review, the negative ones, where they say, Michael Myers is not in this film. And that would be the big point as to why this movie should suck and why we should hate it. I don't want to go that route. I don't want to tear this movie apart just because Michael Myers is not in it and it's not a true sequel in a way. Tear it apart for what it is and admire it for what it is too. Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. It was written and directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, but it is produced by Deborah Hill and John Carpenter, did the original Halloween, and Carpenter helped with the music. He's not credited with it, but he did help write the script too, so it's not as if they're completely uninvolved with this third movie. Given how Halloween 2 ended, they could have a different story every time from here on out. It could have been an anthology series. That's what they wanted to do. That every Halloween night, it would be some different event happening. Think of all the things that happen on Halloween nights. I mean, you've got trick-or-treating, you've got costume parties, there are tricks played on people. Maybe someone TP'd the wrong house and it's turned into some sort of killing spree all of a sudden. I don't know. You could do anything on Halloween night that would be new and interesting. A slasher flick villain who shows up again and again and again. Yeah, that's been done. That's been done. Even back then, a masked psychopath had been overdone. I mean, right after Halloween came out, there were a billion Halloween clones. Though I do understand people's confusion. I mean, after all, Halloween 2 comes right after Halloween 1. It's the same night, same characters, all that, and then all of a sudden Halloween 3 comes out and it's completely different stuff. If the anthology had been triggered in Halloween 2, maybe the transition would have gone over better. But part of the problem is Halloween 3 here does not have the best plot. If it had been a much stronger horror movie, probably people would have liked the anthology idea better. It still might not have worked, but it may have gone over better with the fans. Alright, as to the story, I don't want to give too many spoilers, because if you do see this film, I want you to go in without that many prejudgments on the film. The main character is Daniel Chalice. Now, he's an alcoholic, he's divorced and has 2 kids, and he's a doctor. One night at the hospital, a patient comes in who's clutching a Halloween mask in his hands, and he gives the ominous warning, they're going to kill all of us. Later that night, this patient, Mr. Grimbridge, is murdered in his bed. The assailant then goes out into the parking lot, goes back into his car, covers himself with gasoline, and lights himself on fire. And that's where the story begins. Grimbridge's daughter shows up, and she and the doctor investigate what it was that her father had discovered that would get him killed. They discover a terrible conspiracy, and that is the focus of this story. So how's the acting in this movie? Well, it's solid for the most part. Tom Atkins, who played in a lot of John Carpenter movies as kind of secondary characters, gets to be the male lead here. He works pretty well as this alcoholic doctor, Daniel Chalice. He's believable. Stacy Nelkin, she's okay as Ellie Grimbridge. Their romantic subplot is very unbelievable, but anyway. But the best performance by far is Dan O'Hurley, who is Connell Cochran, the villain in this piece. He has this mask of friendliness that he puts on all the time when he's in public. And Then when he's finally in private, when he doesn't have to put on a show, it just drops completely and you see what kind of a monster he is. And that's really pretty good, you know? And, of course, Dan O'Hurley brings a lot of life to the role. He was a great character actor. The soundtrack to Halloween 3 is a good horror soundtrack. It enhances the story, makes it a little creepier. It was made by John Carpenter and Alan Howarth, who worked together on a lot of music for Carpenter works. Carpenter likes to do synthesizer soundtracks. I like the Halloween 3 one better than the Halloween 2 one, which was a bit overpowering.
The teenager was taken across town to Haddonfield Memorial Clinic.
My music's like carpet. You have come into an apartment. You hire me to put carpet down. I'm going to put a carpet underneath your feet. It's going to support you, but you're not going to notice it after a while. It's going to be invisible. So the music needs to be invisible. It needs to just be under there and support what it is that's going on in the scene.
I guess he went with his music carpet idea in Halloween 3, but not so much in Halloween 2. Speaking of the music, one of the big complaints most people have, one of the other big complaints, is that this TV ad for the Silver Shamrock Novelty Company, the people who make the masks, is really obnoxious, and it appears again and again in the movie. I actually kind of like how it works. It's like it keeps reappearing again and again and again, and by the end of the film, it has a different meaning. It isn't just an annoying advertising jingle by the end. By the end, it has taken on some chilling connotations, and it works pretty well. Before I get to my ratings, I do want to draw attention to something that no one really has noticed with this movie. And that is, it bears some similarities, a lot of similarities, to a certain very popular franchise of movies. The male lead is involved with an attractive younger woman. They use a false identity to gain information. There are a whole bunch of henchmen for the main character to fight, and they all work for a supervillain with a big complicated scheme to kill a lot of people. And they explain their plot in a monologue, leaving the hero alone to die, and then the hero escapes.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Our supervillain here even has a foreign accent, like most Bond villains. Bond even ordered the occasional vodka martini, shaken, not stirred. And this guy here is an alcoholic. That's kind of a stretch, but, you know, I like to think that a alcoholic James Bond would have been kind of awesome. Do I have anything else kind of comedic to point out? Well, the poster. That big scary face in the middle, there's no creature that looks like that in the movie at all. So, I don't know why that face is on the poster. The Season of the Witch thing? Well, there is a witch mask that is being marketed. And, I guess the evil behind this is actually druids, not witches. But if you want to stretch that, I guess you could call them witches. Still, kind of weird. But the big thing is, the night nobody came home. That tagline. That would actually defeat the evil master plan. It requires them to be home. Blast it. None of them came home. Our whole plan is foiled. So it's time for me to talk about it as a horror movie. So, I have the blood and gore scale, and that tells you whether there's a lot of, like, decapitations and so forth in the movie. And there is some stuff like that, and it is pretty bloody and gruesome. I think it is really freaky at times. There's this incident with, like, a kid and bugs coming out of their head. Really disturbing stuff, which helps make it a pretty freaky movie at times. The fear scale, of course, is less about blood and gore and more about whether or not it created a feeling of tension throughout that built up into some horrifying climactic moment of dread and terror at the end. I think it works okay that way. I mean, I've seen much worse horror movies. It has really pretty good build-up by the end. When you have the cliffhanger ending, and it has a good cliffhanger ending, it really has built up some fear by that point. And it has some really, like I said, that gory moment with the kid and the bugs. It has some really horrifying moments. But overall, it is deflated somewhat by certain things. The henchman who can rip people's heads off with their bare hands, crush people's skulls, when you find out what their deal is, you're probably going to roll your eyes. I think that really deflated a lot of the fear by the end of the movie. But it still had, moments, and it worked somewhat. As a movie altogether, I'd actually say it's pretty solid. I want to give it a 6 out of 10. It's not a great movie, but it's not terrible either. You have a great central villain. The male lead is pretty good. I don't like the romantic subplot tacked on. There are some grisly scenes, certain intensity, pretty good soundtrack. It's a solid movie. I think you should probably check it out. At least see why people supposedly think this is the worst sequel ever. Until next time, this has been J. Matt Wygand with Reviews from Purgatory.